Italian neorealism was born from the rubble of World War II. Mussolini and the fascist government of Italy had strict censorship on cinema at the time. With the fall of this government, filmmakers were given a new creative freedom and chose to tell stories previously banned by the government. Stories criticising the war, showing its negative impact and focusing on the poverty and survival of the working class. As Movements in Film put it, Italian filmmakers were now taking to the streets with minimal equipment, non-professional actors, and an unbreakable belief in their socio-political purpose. The style exists in a strange place between narrative and documentary, wherein the narratives, cinematography, editing, and sound are entirely constructed and fictitious, but the directors try to achieve as much realism in the diegesis as possible. Roberto Rossellini's Paisá is among one of the definitive films of the neorealism style. Paisá splits its runtime over 6 separate stories rather than overemphasizing one story. This allowed it to focus on all sides of the war, from the front line to civilians to military police, rather than unrealistically glorifying a single heroic frontline story like most war films do. This choice of narratives very clearly gives a strong sense of realism. These 6 stories were then spaced by authentic documentary footage of the war. Furthermore, none of the stories have a happy, satisfying ending, because in real life, happy endings don't always happen.
Hey, what's up you got there? Address of a whore.
Italian neorealism has a heavy emphasis on working class life and showing Italian life as it was in the streets after World War II had ended. Again, this was reflected in some of the characters being civilians affected by the war and other characters being regular soldiers. No heroes or generals or glorified war propaganda. Buildings and settings were proudly shown off as ruins, destroyed by the war, and a focus on poverty, survival, and social disorder was heavy throughout all neorealism films. Due to the desire for realism and lack of equipment, Paisá almost exclusively used natural lighting, and the 3-point lighting typical in Hollywood films was avoided. Audio equipment was unavailable, and thus audio was not recorded on site. Dialogue was dubbed later in production, which allowed for on-location filming and more freely moving camera work. By reusing army uniforms and shooting on location, there was no need to make sets or costumes, and the extras were real locals going about their day. Editing was very temporally linear, with little to no cross-cutting or time jumps. The editing very realistically followed each story chronologically. As Bordwell, Thompson and Smith put it, the stylistic combination of editing and narrative refused to provide an omniscient knowledge of events, again reflecting the uncertainty of real-life events. Martin Scorsese has described the Italian neorealism style as the rehabilitation of an entire culture and people through cinema. The Italian neorealism films show a piece of history that can never be captured in the same way again, and Paisá is no exception.
Look at the skies, not a cloud in sight, and a million stars. If I had 2 ropes, I could swing here forever. I love this Paisá. I love this Paisá.